Jake Paul just did an interview, and boy, was this interesting. He was talking about his fight with Nate. He said, I'll be happy with 400,000 to 500,000 pay-per-views. He said, but then again, I'm coming off 800,000 pay-per-view sales, my fight with Tommy Fury, so maybe we'll get a surprise. He said, I've never had an opponent who has more impressions on social media than Nate. He said, I've never had an average ticket price for live attendance. I've never had an average ticket price higher than the one we have now. And he either said it's sold out or it's on track to sell out. I think he said it's already sold out. And two things. First off, no fighter's mind works this way. And second, even if it did, they're not in a position to have the capabilities to have access to those numbers. But because Jake is the promoter, he does. Oh, and by the way, the first thing you're probably going to do, the very first thing that your mind is probably going to do is think he's lying. He is embellishing. And that's a fine way to promote. I wouldn't have a problem with it, and neither would you. But you also might not take it as sincere and really value the numbers and the information that he just shared because you might chalk that up to fiction. And I'll just remind you, Jake's never done that. Never. He's promoted with spoofs. He's promoted with comedy. He's promoted in more sophisticated ways. But when he starts talking about the success of the business and what it is he's trying to do, and he doesn't do it often, but when he does it very accurately. So I am going to take those numbers not with a grain of salt. I'm going to take them face value. And I'll remind you of that because we were told that Jake versus T. Wood Part 2 bombed, that it did around 68, 69,000. And when I say bombed, I mean by expectations. And we also know that to be true because guess who told us that? Jake himself. Something that would be very embarrassing for, he told us. He had to cancel the event at MSG with that bottom ramen. He told us. Told us when he refunded tickets what the box office was. I'm just sharing with you. Like, there's a lot of good things he could talk about, but he's not scared and doesn't run from talking about the other side. So I believe him. I'm sharing with you that I believe it because this is really relevant. Now, don't forget, it was only a week ago that Jake Paul came out and said, I'm not happy with Nate. I thought Nate would do more to build this. But now he's come out and he's conceded that he has had a greater effect. Whether he's done as much or not, his reach and his audience was passionate enough that he has had a greater effect than any other opponent. I think that's interesting. And it really is something that Jake Paul has created here. And when this story is all done, this will be studied, for sure. Will it be studied for the good, or will it be studied and reminded of the bad? I mean, right, the story's still being told, but it will be observed. I mean, you have a guy who did not come through the Golden Gloves. He's not a second-generation boxer. He is not a guy that needed to fight. You know, his family was counting on him. They might not eat if he doesn't get in the ring. It's just not one of those situations. This isn't a guy that came up and had 100 amateur fights and aspired to make the U.S. Olympic team. It's none of those things. But it is a sold-out main event pay-per-view attraction. And that is not a story that any of you would have believed had I told you 20 years ago. If I told you, hey, there's a way. You wouldn't believe that it was going to be a main event, sold-out pay-per-view attraction without having those real skills and that real paperwork and that real background. And that was a lot of the pushback. People were watching and business was very good, but the narrative was very against Jake. That's true until he started beating world champions, until he was agreeing to fight actual boxers, until he got in there and did fight. I think the Fury fight served him. I think it just showed the validity of what is happening here and what he's trying to accomplish. I'll have proof of that after this next fight, see if he got a bounce or not. But Where's this going to go? How far is this going to go? Eddie Hearn addressed this last week for the first time that I'm aware of. And Eddie Hearn's a very smart guy, very intelligent, very well spoken. He's a handsome guy. He's real good at making his points to get in there across. And he had to address something. There was a boxing match, and I don't know where it was on the card, but it was the only match from the card that made any media make you think it was a feature match. But it was a girl's fight. When the girl was doing her interview, she was so excited, got the adrenaline going, and she lifts up her sports bra. Right there on live TV. What do they call that, a flash? So Eddie just spoke about that and said, man, we got to disassociate ourselves. I know they're doing good numbers. I get the business there. But to call that boxing as opposed to what we're doing, which is the pursuit of a young man with a dream that sacrificed and worked hard his whole life and got great skills to go against somebody that did the same thing, the cream rises to the top until we actually know who the best is, we put the belt around him. And Eddie's saying, man, these are two vastly different things. But it's the first time that he really drew that, and he didn't put the other companies down. By the way, he said, I don't like what they're doing, but he didn't put the business down. He admitted there's a draw for that, but that's not what we do. And it was just a very compelling thing because my opinion matters, and so does yours, because we're fans, we're viewers. And what do we want to see? What do we want to see? I'm not convinced. In fact, I don't believe in any fashion that Eddie himself would not make an exception if he had the right match. I'm not convinced at all that Eddie himself would not come out to have a little fun if he thought he could sell out arena and move enough pay-per-views and break away from his own model. And I certainly wouldn't blame him. The audience decides. We decide what we want to see. And seeing celebrities and seeing them take risks and changing some of the rules, such as the rounds, just by example, I think it's good stuff. There was a time where the punches were enough. And to use this in an MMA term, there was a time when a cage fight was enough. If I found out they were going to put a cage up and two guys, I didn't care if it was amateur, I didn't care if it was 3 rounds, 5 rounds, 2-minute rounds, I didn't care what they were going. Oh my God, I wouldn't even be able to sleep the night before if I had tickets and was going to be able to go. I would be that excited about it. And it's not the case anymore. The punches and kicks aren't enough. There's too much opportunity. There's 11 fights every Saturday, and some Saturdays there's a total of 22 fights. I mean, I'm just sharing with you, it's a very different time. I now need a story. I need to know why. And that is one thing that Jake Paul provides in spades. Not to mention, he has to. He hasn't been boxing since he was 6. His dad wasn't a boxer who's in his corner and kept him out of school. I mean, some of these stories, it's not like that. He only has the other thing, which is why he does the other thing, and that's why he only does the other thing. But it's working, and it's interesting that it's working. And it's never been tried in another sport that I know of. There were some very good athletes. I know that in my lifetime, I remember Michael Jordan, and he got a chance to go play baseball. And there was a guy named Bo Jackson. Bo Jackson kind of went quiet. Man, this was the biggest sports star in the country, and he was doing 2 sports. It wasn't just a chance to do it. He was a professional football player, and he was a professional baseball player. And I don't know which one he was better at. He was great. But that's a little bit different, right? That's a little bit different. Having an active, world-class, different breed of athlete. It's a little bit different than having somebody famous that turns out he's willing to work really hard and he's willing to risk in front of the world. It's different. And where's it going to go? I mean, where it's going to go is purely based around, does the idea work? Which means, do the profits exceed the expenditures? Is it sustainable? And it's appearing by the numbers that Jake is telling us that it is. And he's the only one with the idea. He's the only with the courage to follow this idea, but that will change. As soon as he has to accept, believe me, the vultures are already watching. Where is it going to go? Should it be stopped? Should we disassociate ourselves with it? No, I don't think so. I don't think anybody here is doing anything wrong.